Hello, my young learners, my young friends. I welcome you all to this English class where we are going to enjoy a wonderful humorous poem, The Duck and the Kangaroo. And this poem is taken from your textbook, Beehive. The poem that we are going to discuss today, The Duck and the Kangaroo, is written by Edward Lear. Now, before we enjoy the poem, discuss the poem, and understand the poem, won't you know about the poet? So, let me take you to the details of the poet. Edward Lear was born on May 12 in 1812 at Highgate near London. He was an English landscape painter who was popularly known for writing nonsense verse and also for popularizing limericks. I will explain it to you what these two new terms mean. His father, Jeremiah Lear, was a stockbroker of Danish origin. Lear was forced to earn a living at a very early age. He was hardly 13 when he started working and earning for his livelihood. He started his career as a painter at the age of 15. My dear children, you people are almost of the same age, and you see how enjoyable life you all are leading. But just think of this poet. He started his career as a painter at the age of 15. But soon he got recognition for his works. He was hired by London Geological Society to execute illustrations of birds. His first book of poem, A Book of Nonsense, was published in 1846 under the pseudonym Derry Down Derry. This was composed for the grandchildren of the Earl of Derby, who invited him to reside at his estate. He was fond of travelling. From 1837 to 1847, he travelled extensively throughout Europe and Asia. After his return, his travel journals were published in several volumes as the illustrated travels of a landscape painter. Lear is remembered for his humorous poems like The Owl and the Pussycat. The biography of Lear, The Life of a Wanderer, was written by Vivian Noakes. Edward's emotional life is very well described in his biography by mentioning his loneliness, insecurity, uncertainty, aimlessness through the playfully absurd surface of his nonsense verse. His own life was full of uncertainty, being the 20th of the 21 siblings. You can imagine that how difficult his life must have been. He died at the age of 75 on 29 January 1888 in Italy. In his first nonsense songs, which were published in 1870, the poems were longer. His characterization was mostly very realistic. And if you see the characters, mostly they were non-human, and the central actions, the central characters frequently involve in a pair or group taking off a journey. Like in the poem The Owl and the Pussycat, Pussycat go to see a beautiful pea green boat. And the duck and the kangaroo hop around the world. So we have seen that in his poems, in most of his poems, we have seen that the characters, they normally love to go around the world, right? Now, there are some very notable works of Edward Lear. Some of these are listed here: The Scroobius Pip, Nonsense Alphabets, A Book of Nonsense, and Laughable Lyrics. I have mentioned the pictures here along with the source. If you really get interested to know and to read more of his writings, you can definitely look for it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that he started his career as a painter, and he is popularly known to be a painter, right? And you can very well see the quality, the beauty in his paintings. They look so real, they look so wonderful. And his travel to India attracted him so much with the beauty of India, the natural beauty, the monumental beauty, that he even painted those and expressed his appreciation in those paintings. So you can just have a look at the paintings that I have tried to put here for you all. First one is Kanchenjunga from Darjeeling. Second is Parrots by the poet. And third is Edward Lear's India. That means you can see that he had painted Taj Mahal here, right? Now, let us see about poet's visit to India. As I mentioned that he had visited India also. His stay in India was for 14 months. His entire journey was of 14 months. He was invited as a guest of Viceroy, his friend Lord Northbrook. He moved across the subcontinent by train, sedan chair, as well as bullock cart. He visited several places from Mumbai to Pune, Kanpur, Varanasi, Kolkata, Agra, Darjeeling, Delhi, and up to Tibetan border. He tried to use Hindi words in his writings, like dobi for washerman, nimak for salt. He was happy to learn that the children of India whom he met during his visit could recite his poem, The Owl and the Pussycat. And during his visit, during his travel, during his journey, he interacted a lot with the children because he loved to know what the children think about his poem, how much they appreciate, and he was so happy to know that the children could recite the wonderful poem, The Owl and the Pussycat. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that I'll be introducing you to two terms, nonsense verse and limericks. Actually, nonsense verse, even in your textbook, you can see that this poem that we are going to read is a kind of nonsense verse. Right? What is it now? It is form of light verse, usually for children, where it is depicting imaginative characters in amusing situations of fantasy, whimsical in tone, and with a rhythmic appeal, often employing fanciful phrases and meaningless made-up words. Now we will get through the examples in the poem that we are going to discuss today, and we'll try to understand how is it a nonsense verse. Limericks is also something that he had introduced. Of course, it is not in this poem that we are going to read, but you must know when you are talking about Edward Lear, you must be introduced to this term limericks, right? What is it? It is again a form of verse which is normally written in 5 lines, and thing is that it is humorous and frequently rude. Now it has a typical rhyming scheme, AABBAA, where the first, the second and the fifth line they rhyme, and the third and fourth have a different rhyming scheme. So this is the peculiarity about limericks. Now let us start with the poem, The Duck and the Kangaroo. You can see that these are two characters, the duck and the kangaroo, and they are talking like human beings, right? You must have read several stories where we find that the animals, they are portrayed in such a way that they can converse, use the words, use the language just like human beings. But through these characters, through these animals, there is a great message that the poets or the authors try to convey to the readers. So let me read the poem for you, and we will be discussing the poem stanza-wise. Right? Okay, here I start. The Duck and the Kangaroo. Said the duck to the kangaroo, "Good gracious, How you hop! Over the fields and the water too, as if you never would stop. My life is bore in this nasty pond, and I long to go out in the world beyond. I wish I could hop like you, said the duck to the kangaroo. So who starts the conversation here? We see that the duck has started the conversation. And the duck is so fascinated, so happy to see the kangaroo hopping. It could hop. And there is a strong desire of this character, the duck, who wishes, who desires to hop like kangaroo and go around the world. Because it seems as if this duck is not very happy with the place where it has to live. It calls itself as living in a nasty pond. So you can see that there is some kind of dissatisfaction that the duck expresses before kangaroo. And in addition to that, we can see that the kangaroo is listening here patiently to the duck, and duck expresses his strong desire as well as the dissatisfaction. Okay, so now we can see the next stanza. Please give me a ride on your back, said the duck to the kangaroo. The conversation continues. I would sit quite still and say nothing but quack the whole of the long day through, and we would go to the Dee and the Jelly Bow Lee, over the land and over the sea. Please take me a ride. Oh, do, said the duck to the kangaroo. So the conversation continues. Duck continues to talk, right, to kangaroo. And in addition to whatever it said earlier regarding kangaroo's way of hopping all around, there is something else that the duck wants. It wants to enjoy a ride on kangaroo's back. Right? And it says that I won't do anything. I would just sit still, quietly, and I would just say nothing but quack. Right? This is the sound that they make. Right? And they would love to go. It's not that I would love to go, but the duck has a strong desire to go with the kangaroo to a place, to an imaginary place, which is called as Dee and Jelly Bow Lee. Right? And over the land and over the sea. And then makes a request, please take me a ride. Oh, do, please take me. Right? It's pleading, requesting to kangaroo to take it on a ride. Now let us see whether kangaroo agrees, accepts this request or denies. Said the kangaroo to the duck, this requires some little reflection. Perhaps on the whole it might bring me luck. And there seems but one objection, which is, if you will let me speak so bold, your feet are unpleasantly wet and cold, and would probably give me the rheumatis, said the kangaroo. Now you can see there is some reply from kangaroo. Do you think kangaroo has agreed at one go, immediately? Does it give a very quick reply and an acceptance? No. There is something that kangaroo wishes to express. It says that I have to think a bit. I'm just thinking a bit. I have an objection here. Now it starts making some analysis. Tries to analyze the whole situation, and then out of his understanding of the whole situation, the kangaroo says that I have some objection here, and if you allow me to speak, then I would express it. And what is it that it expresses? That as you know, duck always remains in water, loves to remain in water. So it says that your feet are unpleasantly wet and cold. Of course, it has to be. And would probably give me the rheumatis. Now, as we read that in nonsense words, we have seen that there is a use of some typical words, some funny words, right? So here you see the word has been distorted, right? The spelling has been distorted. Like it should be rheumatis, whereas the poet has used rheumatis. It has broken the words here. So you can see why is it done, because it has to bring a rhyming scheme here. Rhyme here, right? It has to rhyme with the other word. And another thing is that it also brings a kind of musical effect to the poem, right? Okay, so here we see that Kangaroo is initially not of the opinion to really agree with the request that the duck has made, but has something to express, and very honestly it says what is the problem, what is the thing that really makes him hesitate a bit. Then let us see what happens next. Said the duck, "As I sat on the rocks, I have thought over that completely, and I bought 4 pairs of worsted socks, which fit my web feet neatly. And to keep out the cold, I have bought a cloak, and every day a cigar I will smoke. All to follow my own dear true love of a kangaroo." Now, duck is very, very clever. We can say the duck has all the plannings, right? It has done all the preparations, and at any cost it wants to go for a ride on kangaroo's back. Now, what is the thing? What is the preparation that is done by the duck? It says that I gave a deep thought to it. I was completely into deep thought when you made this statement that I remain in the pond and my feet remain wet, and it may cause some problem to you. So I just thought about it. I just thought seriously about it, and then I came to a conclusion. And what was the conclusion? That the duck has purchased, what is it? It has purchased 4 pairs of worsted socks so that the feet would remain warm. Also, it says that I have bought a cloak. What is it? Cloak. It's instead of clock, we would say cloak. Cloak is nothing but a kind of gown, right? It would keep it warm. Then also it says that I would have a cigar and I will smoke so that it will keep me warm. And if I keep myself warm, then you won't have any problem. You won't feel cold and you won't have any problem like rheumatis, right? And also expresses the kind of pleasure that it feels. Dear true love of a kangaroo. Now comes the kangaroo. Said the kangaroo, I'm ready, all in the moonlight pale, but to balance me well, dear duck, sit steady and quiet at the end of my tail. So away they went with a hop and a bound, and they hopped the whole world 3 times round. And who so happy? And who as the duck and the kangaroo? You see now the kind of compromise the kangaroo has made. What has it done? It agreed to the request and it finally asked the duck to sit, but also instructs him that you sit properly, don't move, maintain a balance and sit at the end, extreme end of the tail, right? And they both enjoyed the ride 3 times round the world, and both of them were so happy. Now, my dear children, that was the end of the poem. But what do we learn from this poem? We learned that both the kangaroo and the duck were good friends. But it is not only the friendship, it is the compromise that proved their friendship. So whenever we are having a friend, whenever we talk about a relationship like friendship, we always have to remember that there has to be lot of sacrifice. There has to be lot of compromise. We should not be selfish when we really have to have a very good friendship with somebody, right? And it is compromise that is the base of any kind of friendship like the duck and the kangaroo. Here kangaroo has to make lot of compromise, right? And see, the duck also does not get irritated. It understands the problem that the kangaroo shares and also takes steps accordingly, prepares itself accordingly, and their friendship continues. You see how they have a very good understanding. They have a very good understanding of respecting each other's ideas. Kangaroo has some idea, the duck has got some idea, and both of them have respected each other's ideas. It is respect, compromise, sacrifice, and lot of care and lot of good bonding between the two friends that really makes a strong friendship, right? So whenever you people have got friendship with somebody, please remember that it is very easy to become friends, right? But it is very difficult to maintain that friendship. And to maintain that friendship and make it an everlasting friendship, you need to have lot of compromise, lot of sacrifice, a very good understanding, and also we have to respect each other's feelings. Next comes the symbolism. You see, there are some examples of symbolism here. See, some things are mentioned here in the poem which stands for, which symbolizes something. Like nasty pond is actually representing the constraints that the duck experiences. It is not only talking about how the pond looks like, but it also talks about the difficulties that the duck experiences. Then it also talks about the duck. Duck has a restricted existence. As you say that in the biography of the poet, we have seen it mentions about his life full of uncertainty, full of restrictions. Here also we can say that duck is one such character that the poet has created, whose life is also full of restrictions. And kangaroo, the pond, is the space that can be both transversed and escaped. Like, what does it mean? That kangaroo, the pond is the space for kangaroo. The pond is the space that can be both traversed and escaped. That means he can remain there at both the places, right? Okay. Now we will go on to the poem. About the poem, you all have seen the poem, that it is of 32 lines, right? And there are 8-line stanzas, right? Each stanza has got 8 lines, and you will find there is a rhyming pair, rhyming scheme. For some paragraph, for some stanzas, there is a particular rhyming scheme. For some stanza, there is a particular rhyming scheme. So in stanza 1, stanza 2, and stanza, if you see stanza 1 and 2, we have the same kind of rhyming scheme. A, B, A, B, C, C, A, A, right? I hope all of you know what is rhyming scheme and how to find out rhyming scheme. You will just consider the last word of each line and you will see the how they rhyme, whether they have the same sound or not, right? And line 3 and 4 and 5, they have the same kind of rhyming pattern, right? Okay, then we will go on to the poetic device, because whenever we are trying to understand a poem, we cannot say that it is a complete discussion without discussing the poetic devices, right? So very first poetic device that you can observe is alliteration. Right? What is alliteration? Alliteration is the repetition of the initial consonant sounds of the two consecutive words or the two words which have been put together with some gap. That is also applicable. Like good gracious, these are two consecutive words, but how you hop, these are not the consecutive words, but they are very nearing words, right? So you can see that in good gracious, g sound is repeated, and how and hop, her sound is repeated. Similarly, in stanza 2, you can see sit quite still and say, sir sound is repeated. In stanza 5, you can see b sound is repeated. And another place, d sound is repeated. So to understand alliteration, first you have to understand the sound. Don't go by the letter, go by the sound, right? Next is anaphora. What is anaphora? When the same word is used in the start of the two or more consecutive lines. When you have two or more lines and the first word is the same, like in stanza 3, we can see that and is repeated in these two lines, and is used. So this is an example of anaphora. We have in stanza 4 as well as in stanza 5. You can see in all these examples the word, the conjunction and is repeated, right? Okay. Third poetic device is enjambment. What is it? That when you have an incomplete syntax at the end of a line, that means you won't find any kind of punctuation mark at the end. There are examples in this poem where we see that it is an incomplete syntax. For example, in stanza 3, you have and would probably give me the rheumatis. So rheum, and after that matis is written in the next line. So you can say that it is an incomplete thing, syntax, right? Similarly, in stanza 4, you have all to follow to true and the love of a kangaroo. So again you see there is no punctuation after true and the next line starts. So this again is an incomplete syntax. Next poetic device is personification. The duck and the kangaroo are personified here. What does it mean? They are just put as characters who can speak, who can act like human beings, like a person, right? So we can see that the duck and the kangaroo are personified here. You have read several stories, several poems where such characters are personified, right? Animals are personified. Then we have the repetition. Repetition is to show the persistent nature of the duck and the urgency of its desire. What does it mean? That why repetition? Repetition, the word itself suggests you that it is the repetition of a particular sentence or particular phrase or a particular part of the poem, right? So here we see said the duck to the kangaroo is repeated in the poem, and this shows that duck is continuously showing its urgent desire to go on a ride. So it keeps on repeating. This is repeated in the poem. That is how the poet has used here. There is also hyperbole. Now what you may say, what is this hyperbole? Hyperbole is nothing but exaggeration. When a small thing is put in a, you can say is exaggerated, right? Exaggeration is used in the poem to create humor in this poem, right? Many such examples you can see that which are examples of hyperbole, like the duck purchases what? The cloak. It also purchases a cigar and 4 pairs of socks, right? Worsted socks, so as to keep its feet warm. But is it really true? It is something that has been exaggerated. Then duck and the kangaroo, they go on hopping round the world thrice. But why has the poet used it? Because this poem is type of nonsense verse where the poet has created such characters, such creations are done to bring humor in the poem and to make the children imagine. Again, you have the concept of imagination here, fantasy here. So now you can understand why is it a nonsense verse. We can say that the poet has tried to fantasize certain things, wants the readers, the children, to read it and fantasize, to imagine that even the kangaroo and the duck could go around the world thrice, right? Very, very interesting and very humorous. Next is inversion. Inversion is nothing but there is a reversal of the syntactical correct order of subject, verb and object in a sentence. Normally what we understand is that when we have any sentence, in that we have, if you see a statement, it is always subject, verb and object. But in this poem, we have seen example where the things are reversed. Like in stanza 4, and to keep out the cold, I have bought a cloak. This is the line from stanza 4. If you refer it, you can immediately locate it, that instead of writing, I bought a cloak to keep out the cold, the poet has written it in a different way. It has brought the object first. To keep out the cold, I have bought a cloak. So subject is put at the end. Verb is put at the end. So this is an example of inversion. So my dear children, this poem has got several poetic devices and such a simple poem, but so rich in terms of message, so rich in terms of the quality of a good poem, right? A poem having lot of poetic devices to appreciate it. Now I have a small question here. We have discussed the message, we have discussed the theme, that it talks about friendship, it talks about compromise. Now there are 3 questions for you. These are not the questions which are given in your textbook. Textbook does not have any questions for you because its aim is to just enjoy reading and reading the poem. But I have something to ask you, or I want you people to enjoy doing these questions. Very simple, but I think all of you will understand and appreciate it. First is narrate or write an incident from your life when you had compromised for your friend's request, just as the kangaroo did for the duck. Many a times in our life, we have seen that we have made some compromise. We have kept the request of our friend, and for that we have to compromise. So just narrate an incident. There's no word limit. You just narrate it to your friends, to your parents, and if you want, you can just write it down also. Second one is, after reading the poem, what do you think is the most important thing for an everlasting friendship? As I said, to have an everlasting friendship, you need to have some qualities, right? It is not only one person who has to think about how to make a friendship everlasting, right? A long life friendship. But there are certain things which both or all the friends have to keep in mind. So according to you, what are the qualities, what are the essential requirements, or you can say, what do you think is the most important thing for an everlasting friendship? Again, this is an open-ended question. It is up to you what you think, how you think that you have a friendship with your friend, and you have it, the most important thing that you keep in mind. Next is, compare and contrast the character of the kangaroo and the duck, right? The kangaroo and the duck, there are several characters, several qualities that are same and several qualities that are different. So you have to sit and think about these 2 characters, the duck and the kangaroo, and jot down. Okay, so I hope all of you have enjoyed this wonderful poem, this enjoyable poem, and you have got a message also with this. So, with the message that you may have long friendship with your friends and you enjoy your relation with your friends forever, I say goodbye. Have a nice day. Have a nice time. Thank you so much.